Now to our other top story at 5. Jarvis Butts, the man convicted for the murder of 13-year-old Naziah Harris and a string of other sexual assaults, was found dead this morning inside his prison cell.
That's right. It happened at the Charles Egler Reception and Guidance Center over in Jackson County.
It has been 2 years and 2 months since I report Naziah missing. I want you to know that my life will never be the same.
Well, the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office told us after his sentencing that Jarvis Butts needed to submit a truthful statement regarding Naziah Harris's body, but that isn't being made public. However, they did say the statements were crucial in bringing closure to some members of Naziah's family.
He, as well as other family members and the public, have been waiting for 2 years now to know, where Naziah is. I did get to talk to one survivor today. She expressed to me that she can finally breathe after feeling suffocated for so many years.
On the morning of March 26, 2026, at approximately 6:45 a.m., staff at the Charles Egler Reception and Guidance Center in Jackson, Michigan, found 43-year-old Jarvis Butts unresponsive in his cell. Just 14 days into a 60-year sentence for the murder of 13-year-old Naziah Harris, the man who held the key to her location took his own life. He escaped a lifetime behind bars, but he left behind a family still waiting to bring their daughter home. Butts may have taken his secrets to the grave, but we are not letting this case die with him. You are watching The Dark Minds, and if you believe Naziah deserves to be found, hit that subscribe button and stay with us. We are diving deep into the evidence he tried to hide, starting right now. To understand the shadow currently hanging over the city of Detroit, we have to travel back to the afternoon of January 9th, 2024. It was a typical biting Michigan winter day. 13-year-old Naziah Harris, a bright-eyed student at J.E. Clark Preparatory Academy, was doing what thousands of children do every single day. She gathered her things, said goodbye to her friends, and stepped onto the school bus. At approximately 3:30 p.m., the bus doors creaked open at the corner of Cornwall Street and 3 Mile Drive on Detroit's east side. Naziah stepped off the curb and onto the pavement. We know now, with the haunting clarity of hindsight, that this was the very last time she would be seen in the light of day. She was supposed to walk the short distance to her grandmother Annette's house, a walk she had done 100 times before. But somewhere between that bus stop and her front door, the sidewalk went silent.
They have, footage of her getting on the school bus, and the bus driver did say that she did get off at her regular stop, okay? And she was supposed to have been coming home, like she normally do.
For weeks, the neighborhood was paralyzed, but it's the evidence that surfaced later, the delayed clues, that truly paints a chilling picture of how close the truth was sitting to the surface. In early March, nearly 2 months after she disappeared, a neighbor was walking near that same intersection of Cornwall and 3 Mile. She noticed a small plastic card lying face down on the cold pavement. Here is the part that haunts the investigators. That neighbor later admitted she had seen that card and stepped over it for 2 weeks, thinking it was just discarded trash. When she finally felt a nudge of intuition and picked it up, she flipped it over to see the smiling face of Naziah Harris looking back at her. It was her school ID. It hadn't been buried. It hadn't been hidden. It was lying right there in the open, a silent breadcrumb left in the very spot where the trail went cold. But the most visceral discovery was yet to come, and it shifted the search from the city streets to the rugged terrain of the Rouge River. On March 12th, a U.S. Border Patrol officer assisting in the massive search effort was combing the wooded area near 7 Mile and Berg Road, a location miles away from the bus stop. There, discarded near the water's edge, they found a grim collection of items that stopped the heart of every officer on the scene: a black hoodie, a single black Nike shoe, and most heartbreakingly, a pink onesie, a jumpsuit that Naziah was known to wear. Investigators noted something deeply disturbing about these items. Despite being outside in the Michigan winter for 2 months, the clothing looked fresh. It wasn't weathered or faded by the elements, suggesting it hadn't been there since January. But more importantly, the fabric was damaged. There were visible signs of a violent struggle, tears and stresses in the material that told a story of a young girl fighting for her life against a force she couldn't overcome. At that moment, the search for a missing child officially transformed. It was no longer just about a girl who didn't come home. It was about a crime scene that stretched across the city, leaving behind a trail of pink fabric and a school ID that had been hiding in plain sight all along. To understand why a 13-year-old girl never made it home from her bus stop, we have to look behind the closed doors of a home that should have been her sanctuary. In the true crime world, we often look for a monster in the shadows. But in Naziah's story, the monster sat at the dinner table. He was a face she knew, a face she trusted. Jarvis Butts wasn't just a family acquaintance. He was woven into the very fabric of her daily life. He was dating Naziah's aunt and was the biological father of her own cousins. He was a man who held a position of authority and protection. But investigators would later uncover a digital trail that proved he had spent years dismantling that trust. The grooming didn't start in the weeks before her disappearance. It began when Naziah was just 11 years old, a child barely out of elementary school. For over 2 years, Butts had been carefully isolating her, whispering demands for silence, and ensuring that their secret stayed buried in the deleted folders of her phone. But by December 2023, the secret became impossible to contain. The walls were closing in on Jarvis Butts, and the evidence was biological. It was during this cold Detroit December that Naziah sent a text message that would eventually become her death warrant. She reached out to the man who was supposed to protect her, typing the words, "My period haven't came at all. I'm scared." In those 9 words, the life of a 13-year-old girl was reduced to a terrifying complication for a predator. She wasn't looking for a killer. She was looking for a way out of a nightmare she didn't fully understand. But Jarvis Butts didn't offer comfort. He offered a calculation. Between December 8th and December 11th, while Naziah was likely sitting in her classrooms at J.E. Clark Preparatory Academy, Butts was using his phone to conduct a series of searches that would make any parent's blood run cold. He wasn't just looking for a solution, he was looking for a disappearance. His search history revealed a desperate man spiraling toward violence. He typed in abortion pills and Planned Parenthood, looking for a medical end to the evidence of his crimes. But then the searches took a turn into the truly macabre. He began researching drinking red antifreeze as a method to terminate a pregnancy. Think about that for a moment. He wasn't just looking to end a pregnancy. He was looking at ways to introduce a lethal toxin into the body of a 13-year-old child. This wasn't a man panicked by a mistake. This was a man premeditating a poisoning. Prosecutors would later argue that this was the smoking gun of the entire case. The motive wasn't just anger or a sudden loss of control. It was a cold, calculated necessity. In Michigan, the sexual assault of a child is a life-altering felony. But a pregnancy? A pregnancy was a living, breathing DNA test that would have sent Jarvis Butts to prison for the rest of his natural life. To Butts, Naziah Harris had ceased to be a niece figure or a child he had known since birth. She had become a ticking clock. And as January 9th approached, he decided that the only way to stop that clock was to silence the girl who carried his secret. He didn't just want her gone, he needed the evidence inside her to vanish. And so, while the city of Detroit prepared for another winter storm, Jarvis Butts prepared for a permanent solution, one that would eventually lead him to a bus stop at Cornwall and 3 Mile, and ultimately to a prison cell in Jackson. For over 2 years, the family of Naziah Harris lived in a state of suspended animation, a grueling purgatory of not knowing. But on February 12, 2024, the silence in the Frank Murphy Hall of Justice was finally broken. Jarvis Butts, the man who had maintained a mask of innocence while a city searched for a child, walked into the courtroom and did something no one was truly prepared for. He traded his right to a trial for a signature on a plea agreement. In a voice that offered no remorse, Butts pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. But as the court clerk read the additional charges, the true scale of the monster was laid bare. This wasn't just about Naziah. He pleaded guilty to 5 separate counts of criminal sexual conduct involving 4 other victims. The youngest, just 4 years old. The oldest, barely 7. As the details of his predatory history were read into the record, the courtroom felt the weight of a decade of hidden trauma. He wasn't just a killer caught in a moment of panic. He was a serial predator who had used his position as a family figure to hunt children in plain sight. The climax of this legal battle arrived 1 month later, on March 12, 2026. The atmosphere in Judge Nicholas Hathaway's courtroom was electric with grief and fury. This was the moment of reckoning. Judge Hathaway didn't hold back, handing down a sentence of 35 to 60 years in prison. In the eyes of the law, Jarvis Butts was finished. He was a middle-aged man facing a sentence that, for all intents and purposes, was a life term. But for the family sitting in those wooden pews, the numbers 35 and 60 meant nothing without a location. They didn't want years, they wanted a grave to visit. And that is where the story takes its most controversial and secretive turn. You see, the only reason the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office agreed to this plea deal, the only reason they allowed a murderer to avoid a first-degree conviction, was a truthful statement. It was a high-stakes trade. Butts would give up his secrets in exchange for a slightly shorter sentence. Prosecutor Kym Worthy stood before the cameras and stated she was satisfied with the information Butts provided. She suggested that the details he gave were enough to bring closure. But here is the private truth that has torn this family apart. That statement was never read in open court. It wasn't transcribed for the public. It was treated like a classified document, shared only with the specific family members Naziah lived with at the time of her disappearance. For everyone else, for her cousin Roxy, for the community members who spent their winters trekking through the Rouge River, for the people watching this case from across the country, the truth remains behind a curtain. Imagine the agony of that divide. Half of a family is told where their daughter might be, while the other half is left to wonder if the police are digging in the right place. Roxy and other relatives have been vocal, questioning why the location of a missing 13-year-old is being treated like a state secret. If the statement was truthful, why hasn't she been found? If Butts finally spoke, why is the earth still silent? In those final moments of the legal process, Jarvis Butts walked out of that courtroom a convicted man, but he left behind a family fractured by a secret deal. He had supposedly pointed a finger at a map, but as he was shackled and led away to the reception center in Jackson, the public was left to realize that satisfaction for the prosecution didn't necessarily mean peace for the family. The truth was out there, locked in a file cabinet and whispered in private offices, while the search for Naziah Harris remained a ghost story without an ending. In the world of the legal system, there is a word used to describe the end of a trial: disposition. It's a cold, administrative term that implies a matter has been settled, a file has been closed, and a soul has been accounted for. But for the city of Detroit, and for anyone who has followed the flickering light of Naziah Harris's story, that word feels like a lie. As we stand here in late March 2026, the man responsible for her death is gone. Jarvis Butts thought he could have the final word. He thought that by taking his own life in a cell at the Charles Eggeler Reception Center, he could close the book on his own terms. He escaped the decades of prison walls, the weight of the orange jumpsuit, and the daily reminders of his cowardice. But in his wake, he left a vacuum. The Detroit Police Department has been forced to walk a razor's edge. On one hand, they have a conviction, they have a confession, they have a truthful statement locked in a vault, and yet the ground remains unbroken. Commander Michael McGinnis and the Homicide Unit have been clear. The legal process ended with a conviction, but our work is not done. These are not just words for a press release. They are a haunting admission that a satisfied prosecutor does not equal a recovered child. Even with the map Butts supposedly provided, the search teams are still battling the elements, the shifting currents of the Rouge River, and the sheer passage of time. Every day that Naziah remains unfound is a day that the private truth we discussed earlier feels more like a riddle than a resolution. If the information was truthful, why are we still looking? The answer likely lies in the complexity of the terrain, the dense brush of the Clinton Township woods, and the deep silt of the riverbeds. But for a grieving family, those technicalities offer zero comfort. This is exactly why the mission has shifted. We are no longer just looking for a predator. The predator is in the ground. Now, we are looking for a daughter. Butts tried to end this story in a dark cell in Jackson, but we are the ones holding the pen now. The search for Naziah isn't over until she is home. It isn't over until her grandmother, Annette, doesn't have to look at a missing poster when she wants to see her granddaughter's face. It isn't over until there is a place for this family to lay flowers that isn't a bus stop or a riverbank. We need your help to keep this flame from flickering out. In the fast-paced cycle of true crime, names fade and dispositions make people turn the page. But we cannot let the algorithm forget Naziah Harris. Every time you share her story, every time you type her name in the comments, you are sending a signal to the authorities that the public is still watching. You are telling the Detroit police that closed isn't the same as finished. We are keeping her name trending not for the views, but for the pressure. Because as long as the world is looking, the police won't stop digging. Jarvis Butts took his secrets to the grave, but he underestimated one thing: the collective memory of a community that refuses to let a 13-year-old girl be erased. We are the voice she didn't have at that bus stop, and we will not stop until the earth finally gives up the truth.
Now, we may still find out where Naziah's body is, as the Detroit Police Department issued a statement saying they're still committed to searches in hopes of finding Naziah's body. Now, the Michigan Department of Corrections told us they couldn't say whether Butts had any cellmates, while the Michigan State Police continue their investigation.
We have reached the end of a legal saga, but for the family of Naziah Harris, the true ending remains just out of reach. In the silence of that prison cell at the Charles Egler Reception Center, Jarvis Butts made one final, selfish choice. He took what some might call justice into his own hands, but in doing so, he attempted to steal the closure this community has bled for. He took a coward's way out, choosing the darkness of a grave over the decades of accountability he owed to the girls he harmed and the girl he killed. But history has shown us that secrets, no matter how deeply buried or how tightly guarded by the dead, have a way of surfacing. The truth is not a fragile thing. It is a force of nature. It lives in the files of the Detroit police. It lives in the memory of a bus driver who watched a 13-year-old step off into the cold. And it lives in every one of you who refuse to look away from this screen today. As the sun sets on the east side of Detroit, the missing posters of Naziah Harris are still taped to the windows. They are weathered now, faded by 2 Michigan winners, but the eyes looking back at us are still bright, still waiting. We do not stop here. We do not accept a suicide note as a substitute for a homecoming. We continue to ask the questions that the legal system has tried to archive, and we continue to stand with a family that is fractured but unbowed. Thank you for walking through this darkness with me today. Your attention is the greatest weapon we have against the fading of these stories. If you have any information, no matter how small, regarding the search for Naziah, contact the Detroit Police Department or Crime Stoppers. Your tip could be the final piece of the map that Jarvis Butts tried to burn. This has been a deep dive into a case that redefined the meaning of betrayal in the city of Detroit. Keep your eyes open, keep your heart heavy for those still searching, and most importantly, stay vigilant. This is Dark Minds. I'll see you in the next investigation.